The Malcontentment Tango is a team of journalists, activists, and researchers with three key missions. A commitment to show an unfiltered view of the before, during, and after of key events, live as they happen. To defend the First Amendment, using our rights of a free press and to petition the government for redress of grievances. And to amplify the voices of underrepresented individuals, including Black, Indigenous, persons of color, and the LGBTQIA+ community. Our team is committed to seeking equality for all and holding those in power accountable. The easiest way to support us is to like and follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter, Periscope, Twitch, and Instagram. Thank you for supporting independent journalism and for being a malcontent. Hey there, malcontents. This here is the Malcontent, and how are you doing? Yoda's down here sleeping asleep on my lap. It is his permanent state. I don't know if he'll pop up your head where you can see it. We have breaking news, and I literally just let the mods know I'm going live right now, right now. So there's breaking news. This is on Donald Trump's Twitter. So if it's on Twitter, this, which is in itself is a sad state of affairs, right? Where you have to watch his Twitter to go, okay, that's the real story. That's what's really going on. So what's going on? Donald Trump has announced via Twitter that he has ordered the GSA to start the transition to Joe Biden, which, of course, we know this is huge, bigly, huge, enormous. What's happened in the last 48 hours to get that to occur is a number of things. And there's a lot here and I'll try to fire off everything that happened. First of all, you had on Saturday, the Trump campaign and his lawyers being given a blistering defeat in the state of Pennsylvania from the 3rd District Court, basically saying that there was absolutely no merit in their case, no evidence presented, and Rudy Giuliani and his team were just eviscerated by the 3rd Circuit Court. You had Georgia certify their results, and that was already after a recount. And that recount did discover about a shift of about 1,000 votes, which I will say is a little whoa. Georgia insists there was no malfeasance, that this was a very common mistake, which identifies a problem that maybe needs to get rectified. If what's happening is somebody essentially didn't, I'm presuming when they say memory cards, I'm presuming they mean SD cards like this, that, somebody didn't load an SD card in. Do better, Georgia. But at the end of the day, what was called out by officials and by the state and by the secretary, and let's not forget, Kemp in Georgia is so far up, meaning the governor, is so far up Trump's ass that when Trump eats a Big Mac, Kemp can taste it 5 seconds later. Also, they have a Republican Secretary of State. They have all stated no malfeasance. There were international observers who said malfeasance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the next thing that you've had happen is their case in Wisconsin is kind of falling apart. Trump's lawyers over the weekend in Wisconsin were saying, hey, people that came in with an absentee ballot and voted on the same day of election with their absentee ballot and then dropped it off shouldn't have their votes counted. And the judge countered with, you are aware, Mr. Lawyer, that you and your wife voted in this fashion, of which the attorney was like, I have no comment on that. So it's kind of like, so basically you're arguing for your own vote to be thrown out here. So what do you want us to do? So you had that happen in Wisconsin. Michigan certified their vote. Remember, on Friday, you had the Michigan leader of the GOP, Michigan leader of their House, and Michigan leader of their Senate, state level, not federal level, went to the White House, visited with Trump. They got to stay at the Trump Hotel. They got drinks. They say that they paid for it themselves. And after they met with Trump, they basically said, look, this is what we told Trump. I'm going to paraphrase. You lost. There's no evidence of fraud or cheating. Get over it. And that's basically what they said. The ballots were, the vote in Michigan was certified a few hours ago on a 3-0-1 vote. So one of the Republicans abstained. The other Republican voted to certify. Of course, abstain isn't great, but that is better than a no vote. So the other thing is, you know, the reality is kind of sinking in Pennsylvania, right? And the reality is sinking in Arizona, and the reality is sinking in Nevada, where they've had also a series of electoral court defeats. And the reality is Trump's lawyers have won all but lost. They have lost all but 2 cases. And the 2 cases that they won are 2 cases that really had no meaningful impact on changing anything with the votes. The hair dye sweat. Layer? Oh, do I have liar? Oh well, sorry about that. I can't fix that. I typed that so fast, but it just makes it more ironic. So what does that mean? It means with the green light for the GSA to start the cooperation with the Biden campaign, it means that the Biden campaign gets a bunch of money released to them to start the transition. I think it's like $8.9 billion. Don't hold me to that number, but they get about 8.9 billion or million. Billion sounds like a lot, but on the other side of the coin, there's a ton of stuff that has to go on with the transition. And when you're talking about a federal budget that is literally in the trillions of dollars, 8 billion is like couch cushion money. So I don't know if it's billion or million. It frees up a ton of money for the Biden campaign to start working on the transition. It gives the Biden campaign access to the intelligence briefings at the presidential level. It also basically orders the organizations within Trump's administration to start cooperating with Biden and their counterparts. Does this mean that Trump has conceded that he has lost? No. And so like I'm seeing some of the comments like, you know, and it's like, it's not, this isn't over per se. But by the fact that, hey, we have to do this transition, this is huge, it's big. The other thing that happened is there was 164 business leaders, including a number of Trump supporters, including a couple of his biggest financial backers in his reelection campaign, that wrote an open letter and put their names on the bottom of that open letter. And basically, again, to paraphrase, dude, it's over. You lost. Start the transition. You need to start the transition now. This is dangerous for the economy. This is dangerous for the United States. And come on, you're acting like a baby at this point. You lost. So, and there's no fraud. The other thing that happened on Sunday, which I think is why we have kind of this, the balloon is just totally deflated. And this started last week. You have Powell, right? And Powell is this woman who was an attorney and who is deep in the QAnon rabbit hole. And she has been making... you could tell when you read the parlor folks, you can read the people who are QAnon devotees and Powell devotees, because they're the ones throwing out this stuff about Hugo Chavez and Germany, and you're just like right, this whole thing that's like this, and you know, it's this misinformation cloud, right? It's typical misinformation because you have no way to like wrap your head around this and figure it out. On Thursday, you had Tucker Carlson come out and say, basically call out her credibility on Fox News, which is huge, which is really huge, where Tucker Carlson was like, look, she has produced no evidence to us. She has produced no information, no nothing, and called her credibility into question. He did it in a journalistic way, because Tucker Carlson is not a journalist, but he did it in a journalistic way, and left the door open for her to, we need stuff. Tucker Carlson got roasted by the very, very far right. He's part of the deep state and all this other stuff, which, again, this less than 10% of people who are just the fanatical loyalists, they're real easy to spot now. They're super easy to spot, because these are the people that are calling Tucker Carlson part of the deep state, the globalist, and he's compromised, and just like, what are you talking about? And Tucker Carlson walked this a little back on Friday. Now, Powell, who Rudy Giuliani and Trump claimed was on Giuliani's legal team on Wednesday, Powell was essentially fired by Giuliani on Sunday night in a letter that was posted, in a very terse letter, that basically said, Powell is not part of the team. Powell does not represent me, meaning Giuliani, does not represent the legal team, and does not represent Donald Trump. And again, remember, Giuliani and Trump both said she was part of the legal team on Wednesday. So what did you have? Let's connect the dots, because you have Tucker Carlson expecting an interview with Powell on Thursday and getting information with her. Powell deferred the interview and provided no information. And not only that, said she would not be forthcoming with the information that she promised she was going to provide. You had Powell's supporters come out with the pitchforks, literally and metaphorically, for Tucker Carlson and Fox News. And Tucker Carlson walked it back a little bit, basically saying, well, maybe she's holding off the information because she wants the lawyers to see it first before the media sees it first. You then had Powell say that she was going to be filing papers in court by the end of the week, which immediately had me scratching my head, because I'm like, it's Thanksgiving and the federal courts are going to be closed. So how exactly are you filing something in the courts by the end of the week? That was my first thought when she said that, right? And she's going to go after Georgia first, and it is going to be her word, biblical. That's what she said on Saturday. Giuliani was supposed to be on Fox News talking about the Powell evidence on Saturday. Giuliani canceled. Then we go to Sunday, where Giuliani essentially fires Powell, and Trump and the Trump legal team go like this, really distance themselves. Now what you have is the Trump team on the end of the day, the end of the business day, here on Monday, basically, they're not waving the white surrender flag, but it's really close, right? You're now going, all right, we've told the GSA they got to start the transition. Powell has nothing, right? Powell's 15 minutes of fame is over. If she had something, this wouldn't have happened, right? Giuliani wouldn't have fired her ass. Trump wanted to distance himself, and they would be waiting for this biblical, her word, biblical, bomb evidence, case filing that we're going to do at the end of the week when all the courts are closed. What? Kim, I know this. I'm reading yours to see your comment right out here, and it's just so spot on. And, they're going to do a recount in Georgia again, right? The third time they count the votes. They're not going to find any more, by the way. Because we have crazy chuds that watch the feed. There are no Georgia votes or votes from any other state on this SD card. I can promise you that. Let's see. This is a 64 gig Extreme. There's probably video on here taken of protests over the summer. It just happens to be sitting on my desk, but I promise you there are no votes on this SD card. But there's no more of these laying around in Georgia. There's certainly not 12,000 votes worth of these laying around in Georgia. But they're going to go ahead and the other thing is when they do the count, right, it's just going to be like this machine or hand tabulation or something. They're not looking at signatures again because they already did all that. So you have that. So yes, I guess the Trump team wants to be told that they lost in Georgia a third time. Here's the other thing that is going to be happening, and I should have had this list pulled up, but man, I just like, we got to get this out. Let's go. Big news. If you look at the number of states that are certifying their results this week, that have essentially, legal requirements to certify their votes because that is the way it is written in the law of that particular state, it's approximately half the states. And you have a number of states that are certifying today and tomorrow. Now, a lot of those states aren't disputed, but again, if you're the reasonable adults that are still in Trump's orbit and you're pulling out the calculator and you're like calculating the certified electoral college votes that are coming, you kind of can just see the handwriting on the wall that you can't stop this. And again, you have international observers that were invited to the country to watch the election. We actually share that information. Their report was one of the smoothest operations they'd ever seen. No sign of any kind of fraud or irregularities. What they saw, I believe they were in like 13 different states and in Washington, D.C. So like 12 states in Washington, D.C. We have the link to their report. You have the GOP in Michigan going, we didn't see any widespread fraud. Certainly not anything to what Powell or Giuliani is saying that's going on. You have Kemp and the Secretary of State in Georgia, GOP, going, there is no fraud. You have the GOP in Arizona going, there was no fraud. You have the GOP in Nevada going, like, I'm calling off these battleground states. We never considered Nevada battleground state. Someone in the Trump campaign did, and you just run down it. Claude, I completely agree that she was bluffing. Or maybe she was hoping something would materialize, right? That maybe I'll scare it out. I know she's a former attorney. I think she's a former prosecuting attorney. Or maybe as a prosecuting attorney, she was just used to lying to get people convicted, because we know through Black Lives Matter that shit like that happens too. And like, people wouldn't start asking to go, okay, you're making these batshit crazy claims. Let's see the evidence. You say you have evidence, so let's see the evidence. And of course, what she has been providing is practically meaningless evidence. Like let's pick this apart. Like the Hugo Chavez one, and Venezuela, this is the easiest one to pick apart, okay? Let's pick it apart. How do you do it? How can I rip this to shreds? Hugo Chavez died in 2013. Now, never mind it's 2020. If Hugo Chavez influence in the software, right, because that's the argument, that Hugo Chavez worked with Dominion to create software that's going to magically change votes and nobody's going to be able to figure it out. That's the accusation. Why didn't the Democrats use it in 2016? Right? Because they had it in 2013. So what? They were like, well, we don't need this in 2016, so we're not going to use it. And if the Hugo Chavez software was so good, again, I'm not saying Hugo Chavez did this, but if the software was so good and so foolproof and then how come Democrats didn't win the Senate and lost seats in the House? Because wouldn't the software have taken care of those problems too? I mean, in Georgia, the Republican Party in Georgia said what happened. 24,000 Republicans that voted in the primary didn't show up for the general election. And we saw the same thing happen with Hillary Clinton in 2016, right? Georgia's a state that's been hit hard by C disease. And you just have people, right? And the level of BS coming out of the administration around C disease in particular has reached this point of ludicrous. You know, and it's not even things like, well, it's not as bad. That's not the part that was ludicrous to voters. The part ludicrous for voters was, we've turned a corner. It's going away. Because Look, you could be a staunch Trump ally, and hearing this message of, we've turned a corner, it's going away, it's magically disappearing, it's already disappeared in the South. See, we've taken care of it. And you're like, my friends have it, my neighbors have it, this business is closed, that business is closed. What do you mean we've turned a corner? Do I trust your Twitter feed, or do I trust my own lying eyes and what I'm seeing going on around me? And enough people had, you know what, I just can't, and stayed home. And that's why he lost Georgia. That and Stacey Abrams mobilized 800,000 black voters to vote. Thank you, Stacey Abrams. And I remind Joe Biden, you are president of the United States, or will be president of the United States on January 20 as our 46th president, because of the black friggin' community in this country. And you better do something. Because I know you're approaching this as a one-term president, but Kamala is not going to get the win in 2024 simply because of the color of her skin and her background. You need to deliver to the black community and the indigenous community and the persons of color community, because if you don't, they are not turning out in 2024. So that's my stern warning to that. I think we we put a thing on Twitter that we had turned a corner off of a 2,000-foot cliff, like in the Roadrunner cartoons. So the last thing that's come out of this is that the really extreme Republicans, like, they don't already say that they're part of the GOP anymore. So you're really talking like this wacky fringe of the far 10% on the right. My hands are on the right, but here they're the right, which is my left, right, left. Yes, right. The far 10% of the wacky right. And don't get offended, Chuds, because I have called out the far wacky on the left also, because there is a really far wacky left side. So the really wacky contingent out on this side are like, we're not going to vote in the Senate races in Georgia because there's no way that he could have lost, and the Georgia government isn't doing anything, and so the GOP is complacent, and the GOP doesn't represent me anymore, so we're not going to vote, and we're just going to let the Democrats win. Thank you, because then we can get rid of Mitch McConnell, at least for 2 freaking years. And if something really happens and there's some changes, we could actually maybe get rid of Mitch McConnell totally, not out of his Senate seat, but out of majority leader, because Mitch McConnell's getting up there in years. So please, stay home. Be upset about it. Please. And help Stacey Abrams. Because I've said this many times, and I'm going to close with this. Mitch McConnell, in my eyes, is the bigger problem than Donald Trump. The problem that Donald Trump brought to America was moving us in a direction of a fascist state, of moving us in a direction where open racism is acceptable, to the point that we are seeing the biggest number of racist attacks in this country, data through 2019, than we have in decades. The numbers are spiraling on the number of racial incidents that are going on. We don't even have the data for 2020. On the other side of the coin, it has exposed how racist our nation is. And the fact that you have a lot of people, I have to make that video. I promised that a long time ago about how to be a good ally with this, right? You have just people that have videotaped. And this is why we see racism didn't suddenly get worse in this country. It was always there. You had 2 things that happened. You had the Trump administration that made it okay to be openly racist, and every person has a friggin' cell phone in their pocket to film the incidents. And that's why we've seen this. So don't let them do that. Well, yeah, I mean, that's basically it, right? Which is why, like, the whole voter fraud thing is just terrible. Oh, Stephen, what an awful comment to say. She's totally not an affirmative action hire. Stacey Abrams has done incredible hard work in Georgia and helped deliver the state of Georgia, which, by the way, let's remember, Biden didn't need to win. Our forecast model, I go back to, we nailed it with 2 exceptions. We didn't predict the win to Georgia. I really thought that Florida would have flipped before Georgia did, or North Carolina. And I got Maine 2 wrong, and I got Nebraska 2 wrong, but Maine 2 and Nebraska 2 offset because they're one electoral vote right. The rest we nailed spot on. So I'm either some evil criminal mastermind that was in on the take. We talk about these things at the Jewish world domination meetings with George Soros. Shh, don't tell anybody. I mean, if you really believe that, I have some oceanfront property opportunities in Arizona. I would love to talk to you. You can send me a message. They're just $3.6 million. You could pay me in Bitcoin. I mean, the point is, it's just like, so what? I'm some criminal mastermind in all of this, and that's why we were able to protect the election all but one state. It's just, wow. All right, Stephen, I'm looking at Seattle from our secret underground lair. And you only been waiting from 2017. Sandy, I've been waiting since 2000. So, Stephen, what are we supposed to be looking for in Seattle? We're looking, and I'll wait for your comment. I know by the time I see it and by the time you hear me, it's like 20 or 30 seconds. Then it takes 20 or 30 seconds for you to respond because that's the beauty of the internet. So we'll stick around for Stephen's thing about affirmative action hire and look what they're doing to us. Look at Seattle. I mean, who's who, who's us, what's Seattle? Dude, you're like vagaries. Get specific. So what, needles and homelessness are an exclusive problem in Seattle? Dude, I could take you to places in Memphis. I could take you to places in Houston, Texas. Show you plenty of needles and homelessness that are going on there, or Memphis, Tennessee. This is probably where you go like, well, those are Democrat-run cities. We've already exposed the trope of Democrat-run cities. 85% of the 100 largest cities in the United States have Democratic mayors. So it just becomes this ridiculous trope of, well, it's a Democratic-run city when basically almost all the cities in the United States have mayors. And if you understood and really studied how laws and rules work, government within a town or a city actually has very little decision-making capabilities. They have to answer to the county, to the state, and to the federal. And so when you get down to what the cities can pass for rules and regulations, you really start getting into things like parking tickets and how many trees can be in your front yard. They can't make up more draconian laws that may go up against the county or the state or the federal, because if they violate constitutional protections, the outcomes of those laws, then those laws get struck down. And then if the city has to fight those laws, they have to spend taxpayer money in court to fight and defend those laws, which is a waste of taxpayer resources. So most cities and communities don't want to climb up on that hill. And let's add, Stephen, since you were tossing these things around here, let's look at what's going on in San Francisco. Let's talk about San Francisco for a minute. I'm talking right to you, Stephen, right? Because I'm sure you will go, San Francisco is the poster child of Democratic-run hellscapes. Full stop. Guess what city per capita has the highest police budget on the entire West Coast? Not in total dollars, right? Because Los Angeles is a vastly bigger city. San Jose is a much bigger city, right? San Francisco doesn't even have 1 million people. San Francisco is a very, very small city, a very small footprint. You know what city has the largest per capita police budget on the entire West Coast? San Francisco. Each citizen in San Francisco pays $709 a year towards funding their police force, roughly. So if you're a family of four and you are paying almost $2,850, rough math, for your annual police protection, guess who has the highest number of police officers per capita on the entire West Coast? San Francisco. Guess who has the highest number of police officers per square mile? In other words, the area that they patrol, right? Once again, San Francisco. It's not even close, right? San Francisco and Seattle are actually almost similar in population. San Francisco is bigger by, I think, about 100,000 when I last looked, roughly. Don't get pedantic on me. And they have over the difference is almost 30% on the number of police officers have. Let me ask you this, Stephen. How's that working in San Francisco? All those extra police officers, all that budget, $709 million. How's that working in San Francisco? Have you been to San Francisco lately? I was just in the Bay Area visiting family down there, right? I mean, San Francisco has a huge homeless problem. San Francisco, forget needles on the street. They got human shit everywhere on the street down there. And San Francisco said about a year ago, you know what? We're going to keep adding police forces. We're going to keep adding police forces. We're going to keep adding. We're going to keep adding. We're going to keep adding. It hasn't worked. And we're going to do something different. They also said that kind of this live and let live thing, that hasn't worked either. So we're going to do something different in that area. And so over-policing doesn't work. Catch and release doesn't work. And I've talked about this ad nauseum. Pelosi doesn't have anything to do with San Francisco, Stephen. She handles federal. So wait a minute. Is it the mayor's fault or is it Pelosi's fault? See, you're just moving the goalpost. You're just flailing here, buddy. It's Nancy Pelosi in San Francisco. That's the problem. She's federal. She's not state, and she's not the mayor. See, you're talking about the cities and the mayors, and then you go ahead and you flip it around. You're boring me, Steven. You're boring. I'm done. Boring. I don't know. One of the mods, boring. I completely agree, Steven, on spending $1 billion a year on... I completely agree on spending $1 billion a year on homelessness. I've talked about that at length. It is ridiculous because we have nothing to show for it. But I don't fault the $1 billion. I don't necessarily even fault city leadership. I fault city leadership to an extent, but where I fault city leadership is that the $1 billion that they are giving organizations, some of them private organizations, by the way, right? There's no accountability. Licton Springs Small Homes is a great example of completely no accountability there. Millions of dollars spent. The whole thing ended up get shut down. And the company that was supposed to be overseeing the operations there was doing nothing. But all of this gets away from the central issue, which is Donald Trump has told the GSA that it is time to start working with Joe Biden on having the transfer of power start to happen to the Biden campaign and cooperate with them and release the funds and release the office space and to start cooperating with Biden and his team in a peaceful transfer of power. Now, this wouldn't have happened today if Donald Trump didn't have the adults that still surround him in the room going, dude, it's over. And he has donors telling him, dude, it's over. Stop. It's done. You lost. How many times do we have to count the votes to tell you that you lost again? So that's it. Penny, Portland, Maine. Oh, I love Portland, Maine. Or if you go by Penny Beth, I called you Penny. If I go by Penny Beth, thank you for your patience. Love Portland, Maine. I have not been there in years. I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in Massachusetts. I've spent tons of time in Portland, Maine. Love the city. And another place that I just adore in Portland is Booth Bay Harbor. Booth Bay Harbor is just so amazing. And yeah, it's so hard to get there. Like, if you're not like total rat holing here, malcontents, if you're not familiar with the Maine coastline, it's almost like Sweden. There's almost like these fjords, right? So sometimes to get from one city to another in Maine, particular if on the coast, and I've had these conversations, right? It's like, so, I've had these conversations years ago before everyone had a GPS on their phone. He was like, hey, I'm trying to get to so-and-so. Where's that? It would be like, Al, as the crow flies or by boat, it's 8 miles. It's just over there. You're like, okay, well, I don't have a boat. I don't say this out loud. I'm like, I don't have a boat, so this doesn't help me, right? But by driving, it's about 60 miles. You got to go up because you got to go like this up and down the coast to get to where you want. But Maine is just amazing. And I miss real lobster. And I know not necessarily Maine. I know Ipswich clams from Massachusetts, but God, do I miss Ipswich clams. And Penny Beth, another thing we can't get out here, we can't get haddock. I totally I totally love. I'm reading Soros sent me. Be nice. Uh, that's one of the sheriffs, David. Be nice. Oh my goodness gracious. Um, Oh, Petty Beth is so nice. Yes, I'm definitely an East Coast boy, and I think it definitely comes out because of all the snark and the sarcasm and the directness. It is something in Seattle. I miss it. I really miss it. I've explained this before in the feeds. In Seattle, everyone here is just it's real. It's a passive aggressive city, right? In Seattle. It's like if somebody's pissed at you, they're kind of like, "Yeah, have a nice day, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it," and you never hear from that person again. Boston, New York, to a lesser extent, Philadelphia, Providence, Hartford, Springfield, right? If someone's pissed off at you, they're like, "Fuck you, you're fucking wrong. I hate your friggin' guts." And then, like, 2 minutes later, it's like, "You want to go get a beer? Yeah, let's go get a beer. All right, we'll go get a beer. I'm still fucking pissed at you. I know you're pissed at me. I'm sorry. We'll go get a beer." And then it's all solved, right? Boston, if someone doesn't like you or not. And likewise, in Boston, like you're sitting in a bar or something. Like I've had people move to the East Coast and like, I'm struggling to make friends. What I'm like, it's so easy to make friends on the East Coast. Can't do it COVID right now. Pre-COVID, what I would tell people is like, look, go to any bar. It doesn't matter. Just go to a bar, watch the game. When the whole room cheers, like happy cheers, even if you don't even know what the friggin' sport is, when you hear happy cheers, not groans, not boos, just turn to the person next to you and go, "That was a great play." Or a great call, right? At least if the ref made a call or whatever, right? That part you can figure out. It just trust me, they're gonna start talking to you and they're never gonna shut up. That's it. You just made a friend. That's how you make friends. It's about the Sox, the Celtics, the Bruins, or the Pats. That's it. See, like you can't see all my Boston sport pennants up on the wall over here. Sorry, Seattle. But that's how you make friends there. Like here in Seattle, you talk to a person at a bar, like, "Hey, how you doing?" Right? You just kind of get this. You get like 5 minutes of bus stop talk, right? Which is like, "Oh, where do you work? What do you do? What part of the city do you live in? Oh, do you have a significant other? Got any kids? Great. Don't ever talk to me again." Right? You get like 5 minutes of passive aggressive bus talk, and then it's kind of like, "Why are you talking to me?" And it's like, because that's what human beings do. The Seattle chill is very, very, very real. K Variable reading your comment about the openness of the West, the hospitality of the South, the directness of the East, and the cheese in the middle. The cheese in the middle is what cracks me up. The other thing is, I lived in South Dakota for 18 months, which was about 17 months too long, but I will say it is the best pork. Oh, look who woke up. The best pork and beef products I ever had in my life were in South Dakota. The other thing is I like walleye. Like you get good walleye in the middle states. And there is good cheese out there. And I totally agree with the Southern hospitality. Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent and I went to Paducah, Kentucky willingly. Um, uh, I say willingly because we were out there to see the total eclipse. Paducah was one of the places in the country where the eclipse was going to have one of the maximum times of totality. It was about 50 miles away where the maximum period of totality was going to be. So we went to go see the solar eclipse a few years ago out there in Paducah. We were going to go see it in Kansas City. When we arrived there, the weather forecast was horrible, and we're glad we left because we heard from people they couldn't see a friggin' thing up there. So we went to Paducah willingly, and we were so impressed with Paducah. The people there, he's so tired, if you can't tell. This is like nap time. He's like, "Just put me back down and let me nap, dude." This is afternoon nap time for the 17-year-old Buck. You'd see he's just melting. There, how about I do that? And you see just the little top of his head. We were super impressed with Paducah. Everybody was really nice, right? It's the total Southern hospitality thing. The other thing is, because I know people are like, "Paducah? The malcontents talking good about Paducah?" Here's the other thing. Their historic downtown area, their architecture is very reminiscent of New Orleans, really reminiscent of New Orleans. Their historical downtown area is gorgeous. That's number one. Number two, the International Quilt Museum, of all things, is in Paducah. Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent went. I was really tired from the drive and getting up early, and I'm like, I don't, and I'm like, it's quilts. And I actually kind of regret and I'm also, I got to admit, it's like, and it's Paducah, right? So I was really thinking, this is going to be like 50 quilts from Amish from Amish people, right? And that's going to be the International Quilt Museum. And apparently, like, no, it's really amazeballs. And the food was really nice. And the other thing is, they have this amazing museum. I guess you could kind of call it a history museum. And it's just amazing. And it's one of those things, if you ever go to Paducah, you should go to the History Museum. And the last thing is where I was really surprised is that they had like a Jewish restaurant, bakery, deli that's actually been there since the late 1800s. I guess it's a really famous place. And unfortunately, when the day we were there, I almost want to say it was the Sabbath that day, and I think that's why they were closed. I know they were closed, and I think it was the Sabbath, but don't hold me to I would have to go back and look. I remember it was closed, and we were like bummed. And they were just so nice there. And Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent was actually a little worried because she has her accent and all this, and just everyone. And not only was everybody really nice, she didn't get the stereotypical, question, which she answers, but, oh, where are you from? Where's it? She didn't get a lot of that. And she actually really appreciated that. It was just, she would kind of like get compliments on her. Oh, you have a lovely accent, that whole Southern thing. And I get it because I lived in Texas for 8 years, and I get that people in the South could be like, you're my best friend as they're twisting their knife in the back. You don't get that in the East Coast. If someone's twisting a knife in your back, you know it. And there's a higher chance it actually might be a real knife. We've gotten so, she loves that museum in Puka. Look at this. You're flipping her out right now. Oh my goodness. Well, there you go. Again, we were really impressed with Paducah. I would not get on an airplane and just go to Paducah. But I will say to anybody, if you are in that part of the country for whatever reason, Paducah is really worthwhile to go, you know what, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 days there to just check everything out that's kind of in that area and eat at some of the restaurants and see the museums, plural, walk through the old downtown. It's a very walkable city too, at least that downtown. There's broad sidewalks and there's this nice riverside park. It's a shocking city and it has a fascinating history. In part because of its attachment to the development of nuclear energy and the development of the nuclear weapons program in the United States. And so there is and some of that activity still goes on outside of Paducah. So it's a relatively educated city, and there is definitely a fair amount of money that is in Paducah. And it comes across, and but it's not pretentious, but honestly, I can't say it. I loved Paducah. I left there. We both left there. Like, oh my God! The bar was so low, and we stayed in an amazing Airbnb, like right in the heart of everything downtown, because it was all we could get in a kind of on an emergency booking. And the last thing is where I'm so glad that we went out there. We saw the pictures like in Oregon of like thousands and thousands of people packed in to see the eclipse. And in Paducah, we were, if this was the age of COVID, we would have actually been socially distanced. Like everybody was there were groups of people, and everyone though was probably a good, 10, 20 to 30 feet apart. Everyone had their patch of grass along the river. And there was a big cheer that went up, but it wasn't like this whole crushing sea of humanity. There was enough humanity there to have a shared experience, but not so much humanity there where it just felt like I'm at Disneyland, for lack of any way to put it. Oh, Raymond, that is so kind of you to say. But with that, I'm going to stop talking about this because we've gone so off the rails on the conversation. We actually don't have a lot of people watching anymore. Which means you should be doing more shares of the feed and stuff so we can get more people watching the feeds. So with that said, let me wrap it up for those of you who are just tuning in. the Trump administration has ordered the GSA to start the transition of power with Joe Biden. This is not, there's no official statement of Trump conceding the election and going that we've lost. The legal battles have not stopped. But I did go over earlier kind of everything that's happened since about Wednesday night to Monday around lunchtime, East Coast time. Everything that has happened in the span of, say, those 5 days that have basically taken all the wind out of the sails out of this whole, it was cheated, it was stolen. And the biggest thing is, I think the biggest news item that's happened in the last 24 hours is Powell and her accusations. She's got nothing because they wouldn't have done this. They wouldn't have done this. They wouldn't have said to the GSA, let's start the transfer of power. They wouldn't have fired Powell over the weekend from the Trump legal team. You wouldn't have had Rudy Giuliani kind of doing the back off, okay? Crazy lady. And don't forget, Rudy was supposed to go on Fox on Saturday with evidence that Powell was going to provide, and she never provided the goods. And so I think that's what I do think that this is, starting the reality, right? We certainly will probably expect a very angry tweet storm tonight, is my guess. And, probably, I didn't admit that I lost, and he'll probably blame some people for pressuring him. And of course, we know how he operates. He may rescind it in, 4 or 8 hours. But his tweet, if you go and look, particularly the Chuds, if you go and look at his tweet, there's nothing to read between the lines here. He is very, very direct that he had ordered the GSA to start the transfer of power. So that is about as, I think, America, that is about as close to a concession as you are going to get from him. This doesn't mean that the nightmare is over. And then the last thing I want to talk about is there is a vigil tonight at 6 p.m. We have the information up on our Twitter. It is for Travis, this activist that was murdered over the weekend in Louisville. There were originally accusations that the shooting involved the Louisville Metro Police Department, LMPD. That is not true. They don't know who shot Travis, but it wasn't a police-involved shooting. Not a police-involved shooting in the sense that, he was stopped or something and the police shot him. There is a vigil tonight in Seattle, East Precinct, 12th and Pine, that will be a candlelight vigil for Travis. A number of black organizers have called this ENDD. That's the Direct Action Group. Has put a thing up on their Twitter saying that they are holding off and deferring on a different event they were going to be doing, and that they are going to be, standing with the candlelight vigil. We are not going to cover it. I'm really torn about it, and I've decided I can't because, again, I've just finished interstate travel. The governor is asking people to self-quarantine for 14 yes, actually, I'll bring that up about the candles. It was brought up, where the governor has asked people to self-quarantine for 14 days. And for me to show up with poll cam, mask or not, or I would be a friggin' hypocrite after everything I have said since early March about C disease. It would just be an indefensible position for me to be there. And so we won't be streaming. I was originally planning a happy hour for tonight, and there's a couple of videos that we were working on. There won't be a happy hour. We may do happy hour either Tuesday or Wednesday. Obviously, we're not going to do happy hour on Thursday because Thursday is Thanksgiving. We didn't do it last Thursday because I was preparing to travel. Raymond, no, I was just explaining I'm not going to be streaming the vigil because I am supposed to be self-quarantined after traveling out of state. I'm still in my self-quarantine period. And it would be I would be in a position where that I cannot defend, and it would be unimaginable hypocrisy for me to go out there and stream. I have said, um, the condition that I have said is like if World War III breaks out, if sectarian violence breaks out, if we get all of a sudden into some kind of place where there is something much bigger happening, then yes, I will go out with the camera. But again, for me to be there at the vigil, I'm not symptomatic. I don't. I have no idea if I've been exposed. Right? It's not. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do. I traveled interstate. I travel through 2 states to get back here. All of those states are asking people to self quarantine. I'm going to honor that. So that's what it comes down to. The other thing, if you do go to the vigil, it is bring your own candle. I'm just laughing. It's gallows laughter. It's not meant as a disrespectful laugh. It's just with everything that's happened in the last kind of 48 hours with arguments on money and stuff. And well, we spent a lot of money on candles, and there's a fair number of jokes that are going around. In some of the issues that are going on with the different protest groups about candles. So this event is bring your own candle. So yeah, bring your own candle. Uh, Yuval, the vigil is for Travis. They're a 21-year-old Black Lives Matter organizer, somebody who is nationally recognized, and very, very respected 21-year-old organizer. Travis was killed over the weekend in a shooting. The shooting was not there was another shooting that happened with LMPD, so I think there's confusion on whether LMPD was involved in that. LMPD is Louisville Metropolitan Police Department. LMPD was not involved in Travis's shooting, but this is a significant blow to the Black Lives Matter community, to the BIPOC community, and to the community in Louisville, Kentucky in particular. And there are vigils that are going across the United States. The other thing I will say, if you do go to the candlelight vigil, seriously, mask up, like really mask up, hand sanitizer, or even better, gloves, because like it's freaking cold. So you have an excuse to wear gloves, and social distance, because the numbers are bad. And there really has to be this balance of acknowledgement and recognition of what's happened, but we have to also acknowledge that we have to provide safety to the community. The other thing is, if you are like, screw it, I'm getting together, I'm having a small group for Thanksgiving, although I don't think a lot of people that listen to me take the approach of, I'm going to have a small group over for Thanksgiving. It's just going to be Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent and I this year. If that's your plan, I'm going to appeal to you. Don't go to the vigil, because if you were to get exposed there, by the time you get to Thanksgiving, you may be an asymptomatic carrier. And now all of a sudden you're well, screw it, I'm going to get together. But just with a little group of people that I know and trust, you may turn into a super spreader event. The numbers are really bad in the state. And yeah, I have selfish motivation in that because of Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent and what she does. And I'd like for her to continue to come home safe. Sleeping in separate rooms and having to take off your clothes when you come into the entryway, and some of the other protocols when things get really hinky, like we had to do at the start of the year, or the start of the whole C disease thing. All that sucks. It really sucks. We've had to do more. Hey, could you put a trash bag by the front door so I could strip down in the entryway this year? Because I've had to make those calls several times, because it's like, yeah, I'm really spicy. It's like, oh no, it's really, really bad. It's really bad. Funny story. We have a cat, and our cat is addicted to ballistic nylon. He loves laying on ballistic nylon. And if you're like, ballistic nylon, it's what suitcases are made out of, right? They call it ballistic nylon. I don't know why. It's not like so. And if you put anything on the floor that is ballistic nylon, boom, he's just laying on it. It must feel good to him for some reason, because he really gravitates to this stuff. He has never, ever, ever laid on my plate receiver, which is ballistic nylon. And the only thing that we could guess is that it just must reek, because his nose is far more sensitive than ours. So even if it's been cleaned, it must reek of like tear gas and pepper spray and stress hormones. It's just no interest in laying on it. So Yeah, that's basically it. Or certainly stay home if you think, if it's like, oh, I was exposed to somebody, right? And stay home, stay home. It's part about keeping everybody safe. Uh, uh, Travis, Rachel, I agree. Travis was this amazing young man. We just hear this story in the black community too often. Oh, so much potential and so smart. And, you, you know, we'll find out what happened there. I really hope it was just a random act of violence of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. I would hate to discover this was something targeted, or if this was, say, somebody from the far right. I'm not saying any of that happened. I'm really hoping this was just a random thing, or a robbery gone bad or something like that, and not something more sinister, or a targeted assassination by somebody on the right. Because there's been a fair number of that stuff that's happened. Yoda is dreaming like crazy in my lap right now. Oh my God, I wish I had a camera that was like here. He may start barking. He's like all twitchy and stuff. All right. So again, the big news isn't just about the vigil. I was just asking people. Oh, and if you want to amplify the vigil, go to our Twitter, Malcontentment T. So it's Malcontentment with a second T. You can go to our Twitter and you can retweet out, but it's at 6:00. It's outside of the East Precinct at 12th and Pine. I sincerely don't believe if I thought this was kind of like, yeah, and the pepper spray and the flashbangs are going to fly. Then you never know with SPD, but there seems to have been a significant shift in tactics with Diaz. If Carmen Best was still police chief, I would say, yeah, you're going to have to approach this as anything goes. It does seem under Diaz that they've pulled back on the overly aggressive tactics. However, they've gotten a lot more aggressive if they even think something's going to happen. But I do think that this is just going to be a peaceful candlelight vigil. That's my view and my gut. So, yeah, I wonder when he dreams. Raymond, I see your comment here. I wonder when he dreams if he, is he no longer 17 years old and blind and deaf and arthritic? And I kind of think probably he probably isn't any of those things in his dreams. I have a feeling that he's. They say it's just remembering their younger days, something that happened in their past. So I'm hoping it's good things that he's remembering. But yeah, he's totally zoned out. He actually had a real rough night last night. So hoping he doesn't do a little better tomorrow. All right, malcontents. The big news. Trump has told the GSA, hey, you got to start working with the Biden campaign. We got to start this transition. So I don't know. That's the big news. And I think what it comes down to is, one, Pal's got nothing, right? That was their big conspiracy theory person that was going to expose all the fraud. There's a ton of evidence. If you look at the chessboard, Pal's got nothing. They voted Pal off the island last night. You have Michigan and Georgia that have certified. You have more and more people in the Republican Party in the last 48 hours saying, dude, it's over. You have to start facing the facts. And you had 164 business leaders, including some of them huge Trump supporters, huge Trump financial backers, who signed on to this letter basically saying, it's over. You have to start the transition. There was no fraud. Stop this. That doesn't mean that this is a concession. That doesn't mean that he isn't going to tweet at 3:00 in the morning that he's walking that back. That doesn't mean that the court cases are going to stop. It certainly doesn't mean that the crazy is going to stop. And I think this is what I told Dr. and Mrs. Malcontent, and I'll close with this. I think for the most radicalized factions within the Trump camp, they are going to start moving from denial, right, through stages of grief. What comes after denial? Anger. And I think now that we have this and we're going to have a ton of votes certified over the next 5 to 10 days, I think we then start moving into the anger phase. And I think this is where things can get more dangerous. And then I think the week before the inauguration, the day of inauguration, and a few days after that is our next really dangerous window, because that's again where the people are like clinging in denial that this isn't going to happen, and then when Biden gets sworn in, that's when you're going to have kind of this next wave of anger, and I think that's when things get real dangerous, and we'll just have to see what happens, because there's some real batshit crazy out there. So with that, here, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to do this one. You know what? I'm going to rub some salt into the wound too. Let's do this one because in honor of the recount there, all right, I've had my fun. All right, malcontents. Rest in power, Travis. Oh, I do have one more thing. Go to malcontentment.com, the website. There is a long piece written about the history of Thanksgiving, the real history. Educate yourself. Knowledge is power, and share that out to the world. It's a great piece, and a ton of research went into creating the real history behind Thanksgiving. And what Charlie Brown taught you is a load of shit. Malcontentment.com or malcontentnews.com. The new URL works as of today. All right, with that,